So Juno, do you want to
Yes.
say a few words and then I can get started?
Okay, so welcome to the book club meeting. This is the second book club meeting we are doing. And next book club meeting is on February 23rd. For today's book club meeting, Dr. Betabit will cover section 3 and 4, which is chapter 7 to 12. So Dr. Betabit, you can go and start.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Juno. And thank you for this opportunity to facilitate this session. There are so many things in the chapters that I read that it's impossible to encapsulate everything. There's just so many ideas in there. So what I have tried to do is give us three main thoughts so that we can address some of the nuances in each of those. And I'm just going to scroll through each of the little panels that I see here to just make sure everyone is hearing me okay. Yes? Okay. Sounds good. So now I will start sharing my screen, after which I cannot see all the panels. So if I don't acknowledge you, please type in the chat window or speak up so that I can address anything that you may have.
Dr. Beturbet, there's one thing I might ask other people to do, or if you guys on your end could do it. If you mute your microphone, it will make it easier to hear you and cut down on background noise.
Okay.
So if everybody could mute their microphone, that would really probably help for your presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, that is helpful. And I will, if somebody is talking, I'll try to do it on my end too. I think that really makes a difference. Thank you. So I will share screen now, and it's a PowerPoint. I'll go through the slides, but I'm going to stop and play some videos once in a while. The only reason for having some of those videos is it brings in voices and representations from others that have helped form my thoughts as I was reading this. So first, I'm hoping everyone can see the screen. I'm going to start.
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So I tried to put here what are the four main ideas from what I was reading, and I'm sure it continues some of the things that you talked about in the first session. Which unfortunately I was not able to attend, but I did catch the video. Thank you so much for doing that. So it seems like in addition to maybe other important ideas, the concept of abundance is surrounded by these four main branches, if you will. And it's not in any particular order. There is much talk about exponential technologies. There is the concept of emergence of many DIY innovators. There is mention of techno-philanthropists, a new breed that's emerging, and a recognition of this really large creative power as well as consumer power, which the authors refer to as the rising billion. I know that in the last section, you did read about Singularity University and the organization that was created by one of the authors to begin to collect some of these ideas together. I do have a video about that I used to develop my understanding of what they are about. And I'm going to play that. And the only way I can do that is end the show and go back to it. So bear with me, but I've downloaded everything here. So hopefully we can play it without Has anyone seen this already?
No.
Okay, so it might be worth just taking a look. This is from the Singularity University, and it explains in their words what they're attempting to do. Can you hear the sound?
Has the necessary
Yes.
tools to tackle our biggest challenges and create abundance for all. It has the visionaries.
It has teachers.
Not very well.
It has the technologies.
It has the makers.
It has the capital. It has millions of people from every corner eager to devote their hearts and minds to catalyzing change. When these ingredients come together, their capacity for impact becomes exponential.
And so, our world needs a singular point where all of the ingredients can convene.
Our world needs a new kind of space where synergies give rise to a new universe of unimagined abundance. Where an entrepreneur imagines with a nanotechnologist, experiments with a synthetic biology algorithm, builds with a prototype machinist, collaborates with a manufacturing engineer, proves a new concept in the field with a global NGO, scales it with a venture capitalist, and finally emerges with an exponential solution to an urgent global challenge.
We are Singularity University. We are just such a singular point, uniting all the ingredients, not in a place, but in a mindset.
An exponential mindset.
So I'm going to stop there. And the reason I showed that is it helped build my understanding of two things. One, the whole idea of abundance needs a new kind of space to enable the kind of interdisciplinary synergies that are needed to tackle some of the issues about or surrounding abundance and the innovations that are necessary. So I wonder whether anyone here had any thoughts in addition to those two things that I caught from it about it needing a new kind of space and a new mindset, and the fact that it needs so many disciplines intersecting or interacting. Was there anyone who saw something else or saw something more in that short clip? Okay.
This is Cindy.
Yes, Cindy?
Well, I guess kind of when I'm thinking about all of this stuff and reading this book, sometimes I kind of get a knot in my stomach because I think we're kind of like this, everything we're seeing happening in our country just in the last 2 months is kind of a reflection of either people being really excited about a new design or people reacting with fear to kind of a new thought. So if we're looking at a new kind of a DIY innovators and a new techno economy, how does our political and like dismantling public schools fit into that? Is that a good part of that, or is that a difficult part of that, or is it something that has to happen so that all this abundance can take place? And that's kind of where I'm at when I'm reading this book, like between excited and like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to us?
Uh-huh.
I mean, the whole thing is totally hopeful in contrast to our horrible politics around us. So
really, I mean,
there's a great ray of hope to know that there are so many wonderful brains working across the world and working together to create positive new things, to bring up the bottom billion up to some normal life, a daily life. And that's a great, great thing. And one of the things I love in the whole thing, which I read before in some other magazine article, the farming, the vertical farming, that is a fantastic thing, I think. and the way it came about and the way it is being done now in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And it's productive and it is successful and it's working and it's real. All these things are wonderful, I think, absolutely wonderful. And so maybe we can hurdle this horrible situation we're all in the world right now. I mean, it's terrible. And maybe we can overcome it and get to the next place of something positive and workable and livable.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Renata, this is perfect because that was exactly my next slide. So, and that's perfect. But Cindy, we will come back to the issue of how systemic everything is, and you cannot ignore some of the impacts that we might be having to address in a new way.
Can I say two things really quickly?
Sure.
Well, I'm glad you added a little dot for connected world, because one of the things I'm thinking while I'm reading this is kind of how do we build community?
Mm-hmm.
He talks about individual education or everybody working individually on something or specializing. How do we build community while we build abundance?
Exactly.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, that's one important point that I keep thinking about. I just wanted to.
Sure. And we definitely will come back to that. And so, like I said, this book was taking me in so many different directions, in so many exciting ways. But like I said, in the time that we have, the three things I've chosen to focus on, which does not mean that we should not have all of your thoughts included as we develop these thoughts, develop these ideas. The first one is nutritious food. The second one is clean water. And the third is a connected world. And I have some things that definitely we should look at. And under nutritious food, exactly, the thought of vertical farming was extremely exciting. Renata, like you pointed out, they are successfully doing this in New Jersey. This is Aero Farms. So I had to dig down deeper and look at how exactly is it being done. I'm a visual person, so I had to see it in this way to understand it much better. And there was a really good article in the New Yorker that explained. Did you read that?
I read the book.
Excellent. And so that, I think I might have a link in this PowerPoint. If not, I can certainly send it to whoever is interested in reading more. But it explains some of the experiments that they had to do to even come up with this cloth medium that would enable the growth of these greens. And then the next slide, I just was struck by how they are portraying what they do and what their goals are. And I've highlighted some things in there that I thought were interesting to me. But then when you read that, and I'm going to read this because I want us to discuss some of those things. Their mission or their goal is to disrupt the traditional supply chains by building farms on major distribution routes and near population centers, defying the traditional growing seasons by enabling local farming all year round, and then doing all this while using less water, specifically 95% less water than field farmed food, and with yields that are 130 times higher per square foot annually. So this is from their website, but it made me think about a lot of these questions that I list here, right? This experiment and this very successful experiment with Aero Farms is just the greens. So obviously there are certain constraints and opportunities there. But when I began thinking about our food, how is it grown? Where is it grown? By whom? And with what? I was thinking about our traditional notion of a farmer. and I found many images, but I was trying to look at what would be a stereotypical image of a farmer with a tractor and, you know, on the land versus a farmer in the aero farms. And if you look on the right-hand side, that's a farmer, and that's, you know, in a lab coat. So I guess I just want to open it up for some discussion about great idea. It's going really well in terms of abundance, making a little dent in that idea. What are some of the thoughts? I'd like to hear what you all are thinking.
Well, it can be reproduced anywhere. The New Jersey experience can be supplanted anywhere in the United States, for example. Every city and every little village has empty buildings, and you can go into these empty buildings, and the technology is at your hand, and you can have an expert come in and set it up, and there you go. And you can employ local people to manage it and to do the work for it, and it's doable. It's doable everywhere.
Yes.
So that's it's a huge super plus in my mind.
Sure. Some other thoughts?
Well, I like the idea on multiple levels, just like Renata said. And one thing that has come up that has been raised to me, people have questioned me about, well, what about the biodynamic nature of the soil, you know?
Yes.
So trace minerals, micronutrients that might not be absorbed. I think that could be overcome in different ways, and I'm not entirely sure that the plants are going to be making some of those things out of the basic NPK. And then there's no pesticides. I mean, if you handle it properly, there's no pesticide residues. So there's a variety of things, you know, that I think make it a technology that is exciting, less water, as you mentioned, and then the opportunity to create jobs for these folks, which these products, because they're off season and because they're grown with very little pesticides, will garnish like top dollar for the people that are selling them. So it's very interesting. I think there should be maybe some studies of comparing the plants grown organically in the soil versus, but, you know, realistically, you could also, if you do encounter issues, there's probably ways you can overcome that. So
as far as I got out of my article I read, they are spraying and giving the nutrition that is missing in water that comes from soil. They add it to it and spray it onto them. The spray mixture is very scientific and detailed and thought through. And
right. Well,
you can only eat green.
I've looked at. Oh, I'm sorry. Have you looked at some of the ingredients associated with like aero gardens? Aero gardening is basically the same thing. Have any of you ever worked with it or done the aero gardens? You know, you can get these Miracle Grow aero gardens right now.
Yeah, I don't know about those.
I've worked
commercially.
I only know about this vertical planting super successful experience from New Jersey.
Well, I've got two different aero gardens. One is like a mixed herb aero garden, and the other's tomato plants.
Oh.
And I did, you know, like you take a look at the fertilizers and things like that, and it is pretty basic right now in PK with a little bit of minerals. And so the person I was discussing this with, you know, they're like, well, there's a lot of other, you know, substances, things that come from fungi that are in the soil, et cetera, that could end up maybe in the body of the plant that they might not get from this fertilizer you're adding. So whether that's true or not, again, like, I don't know, but, you know, it's just something that has come up.
Well, we also have to eat other things. You don't only eat greens, you know, I mean, you eat other things. You eat roots, and we need to grow roots, and I'm sure they're making huge efforts to grow cassava more. I think that was in the book too, how they are coming to growing cassava in a different way that is much more productive and doable and certain to get proper results. And whatever, I mean, all this it has to go, it will probably go hand in hand, like all these other things, like the technology all over the world, and the cell phones spreading, and all banking and medicine and everything.
Yes. And it has so much potential and so much, it brings in diverse fields, people from diverse fields to address the issue of nutrition in very different ways. I think, I'm trying to remember if it was here or in something else associated that I was reading, that it could also enhance the nutritional aspects in a way that could direct it to certain specific nutritional needs. And so, there's immense potential there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the way I see it, it's like the first step in a million steps, and there's so much more to be discovered in here. Any other thoughts by those who may not have pitched in yet?
I have a quick question, because it would seem to me in an enclosed environment like that, you're going to have issues with pesticides, with pests attacking the plants. And I'm wondering how they manage that, because I know most people who work with the greenhouse will use nematodes and things like that. So I'm wondering how they're managing these environments.
So I used to grow a lot of plants, and lettuce or greens, generally their lifespan isn't very long.
Mm-hmm.
And so pests aren't an issue.
You just eat the scales.
Because you eat them so fast, the pests don't have a long enough time to set up shop. Yeah, incubate, multiply, and all of those things. So if you're growing greens, and just greens, is generally not a problem. Yeah. Now other plants, like you take tomatoes or peppers, that's a different story. And you'll get all kinds of pests.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And that was that was one of the things that was going through my mind about it's a fantastic experiment. It's a wonderful success story. But it's addressing a part of the whole nutritional aspect. And so that's why I feel like we have miles to go and miles to grow, because we have so much yet that we have to configure and figure out. I am going to move on to this issue of water in general and clean water. In particular. Obviously, there are multiple aspects and nuances here, but one of the things that we've just sort of finished, and some of you may be aware of this, the United Nations they've just wrapped up, if you think about, this is 2017, they just wrapped up an international decade for action, which they had called Water for Life. And in 2010, they had passed a resolution to recognize water as a human right. And they, I was looking at the resolution and reading it in a little bit more detail. And I'll try to see if I can pull that up for you. Hold on. And the only reason I decided to do this in multiple ways like this is it was so much smoother in my test with Farah to have it separately playing like this. So this is a video. I don't think I have the resolution pulled up, but you can go and read it and see some of the things in it. But one of the things I wanted to discuss is this. Is water a human right, or is it a commodity?
A necessity.
Pardon?
It's a necessity, so that comes between commodity and right.
Okay. Yes, that's another way of putting it. I'm going to play this and then we can discuss.
Here at the Welfare Rights Office, we started to get more and more calls per hour where people were saying, welfare rights going to help us. We just got a water bill, or our water was just turned off, and the bill that we received is so high we can't pay for it, and we need help. They charge you like 3 times more than the water. If you use 100 cubic feet of water.
Every year, the water department has been raising rates for at least 30 years now. Some people are paying up to 20% of their limited income just in water alone. Last year, they shut off water to about 100,000 residents in the city. They have been shutting off water for years, but nowhere on this scale.
I've been in the trenches on civil rights and human rights issues all of my career. But when I heard this being explained to me, basically it makes my blood boil. It makes me want to get up out of my chair and start working.
The truck would go down 1, 2, 3 Main Street. They start there, and they go to the next block on Main Street, and the next block. Just turning off water over and over again. It didn't matter if there were veterans living there or disabled people, seniors, children.
They were not saying anything. They just moved to, when they finished, they sprayed a bright blue paint on the sidewalk in front of the home. And so we filed a lawsuit, and our basic issue was, let's stop these shut-offs and let's create a very rational plan to handle a set of circumstances where someone's got behind in their water. It really was irreparable harm that we were able to show the judge that he went for profit over people and ruled that money was more important, basically, than the human rights that we laid out in front of him.
Okay, I'm going to stop there. But I guess I wanted to also get some of your thoughts on many things going through when I was reading through the book about access to clean water. Obviously, that is a concern we can discuss. Is it a human right? Is it a necessity, which is in between the human right and the commodity? But then also this issue of access, if it is a commodity, how it's handled in different states and different countries. And I just wanted to open it up for perhaps your thoughts and what you have heard and what you have gathered from either the book or outside.
Well, if nobody is saying anything, I have a thought or a statement, whatever, that you can do so much more than is being done right now in cleansing the water and purifying water by solar power.
Mm-hmm.
And many, many of the countries and places where water is enormously polluted, the sun is shining all the time. So that's definitely a possibility. And somehow the regular mainstream American businessman doesn't embrace that yet. If you go, for example, to countries like Nicaragua, where water is terribly dirty and full of toxins and poisons, and children get deathly sick every day, they send presents instead of sending some technical equipment to cleanse the water. So it's all not quite coordinated in people's minds yet, and it needs to be getting to that place where that's a priority. Here's sunshine, here's solar, and let's do it. We must do it now.
Okay.
This is Mark. I'd like to add a comment about necessity.
Mm-hmm.
I believe water is a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly there seems to be situations where when water is delivered to homes that there is a financial obligation, but it doesn't seem right to just cut people off unless you can give them some kind of alternative.
Mm-hmm.
Because without water, we all know we don't live long.
Mm-hmm.
So I certainly feel that water is a very, very important necessity.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to add a little something about the cost that was mentioned in the video.
Yes.
And under the Clean Water Act, there used to be a section where federal funds were made available for drinking water treatment facilities, upgrades on the distribution systems. And that's long since passed. So that entire infrastructure area has not been addressed in any federal sense for a long, long time. And a lot of the costs associated with drinking water, the rising costs, are associated with redoing old treatment facilities and pipes. And there are a lot of leaks in the system. There are a lot of eddies. There are a lot of places that bacteria are building up for people. And there's a lot more tertiary treatment or third stage treatment to remove chemistries, different kinds of nitrates and other maybe organic solvents and things that have contaminated the water that is costing more and more. And that burden falls very heavily on, obviously, people with lower incomes, the elderly and people of lower socioeconomic status. Mm-hmm. And that is a reality that's creating some major stresses in areas around the country. Like, was that from Detroit, Dr. Betcherbet?
Yes, yes. That was from Detroit, yes.
So I was just adding that for people to think about. And since there's no federal grant dollars, hasn't been increasing, it actually was cut as far as I know, after a certain period of time. It just wasn't any more available, and they never made more available.
And what's worse, now they're dumping coal sludge into rivers. That is now permitted. It's insane. It's completely
with the whole fracking issue also, it's becoming a huge issue. And I don't know if people are aware, but Republican legislators in Florida have initiated, legal proceedings to try and block fracking in Florida because of the water issue in Tampa.
Is our speaker? This is Pat Higby, and
Hi, Pat.
Hi. I'm on the Office of Consumer Advisory Board, Office of Consumer Affairs Advisory Board.
Uh-huh.
Very interesting that we have a coming water crisis right here in Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we have so many very small towns with very old water infrastructure
mm-hmm.
that it up so that when they get cited because of issues that they're having with their water, what they're actually doing is selling off the city water to private companies so that then they will do the upgrades to it, which is, they discussed at least 2 towns in Iowa that have done that so far. And they're very concerned about it because when they sell it to another company, then they're using money from non-local residents to pay for the upgrade of that town's water system. And so there's some legal issues there as well. But I never expected to hear that about Iowa small towns. And we also have issues with water.
Yes. Is Pat still talking? Sorry, I couldn't.
No, I'm finished.
Okay. No, that's a really good point, Pat. And one of the things that was just in yesterday's news, let me see if I can share my screen again so that you can see what I'm seeing. So this is what I saw in yesterday's news, in addition to what you're saying. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So it is an uphill battle in terms of access and concern about our water and clean water in particular. And it's very interesting to hear your perspective being on that committee. Any thoughts about what Pat just shared and our most recent news that I shared?
This is Christine, and would you send me, I'd like to have that URL so that I can read the whole article, the KCCI one that you showed.
Yes, I will send that. Maybe, I could maybe put that in this PowerPoint and maybe you could send it out to.
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
Because there are some other links in there that you might find interesting also, Christine, and everyone else. So it was very intriguing to see, and you might remember reading this, the idea that Dean Kamen came up with for Slingshot. Do you recall reading that? The Slingshot idea? If you have the books in front of you, I can maybe point you to the part in the book. This is when Post-it notes would have helped. Page 89, where technology is used to bring down the giant problem of waterborne illnesses. And the technology is called Slingshot, and it's the size of a dorm room refrigerator with a power cord, an intake hose, and an outflow hose. And it's basically designed to purify any source of water that it is assigned to or connected to. And because this book was written quite a few years ago, I tried to see if there were any more recent developments of the Slingshot idea, or whether it had taken off, or whether it was being used. What I could find, and maybe this is where I'm going to ask all of you whether you found anything more than what I found a documentary about how it was made and about it. I did not find much more on, was it scaled up? Was it made available? Was it being used? And things like that. So I was just curious to see if any of you had maybe dug down a little deeper and tried to find, because to me it seemed such an attractive idea if indeed it was the case.
Gary, I looked into that too and tried to find if it had been widely implemented, and I didn't see that it had.
Okay.
Other filter approach, the nanoscale, not the paper filters, but the nanoscale, like bacteria, lead, and it doesn't catch everything though.
Yes.
Devices, you can buy those online now, but they're expensive. I mean, to get one that lasts forever, like 1,000 liters or something like that, it's like $150, but you can buy them on Amazon. So as far as having a major impact on developing countries where, to bring down the birth rate is to make sure that clean water and food is available so that the mortality rate drops. I think $150 is a lot of money. It would be hard for people to afford that are very impoverished and living, on the edge. And again, then even with the filters, able to purchase those on Amazon. They won't take out like arsenic. They won't take out nitrate really, but they'll get like lead and some organic compounds, like, and then they'll get all of the, they'll get some of the pesticides, and then they'll get the bacteria, protozoa, stuff like that, which is important to prevent diarrheal disease in children.
Yes.
I would tell you that I know a gentleman in Iowa here that just finished up on a project. It's a proposal for the government. The government, he says, every year is looking for ideas from scientists and entrepreneurs, sort of not like the X Prize, but very private, on a very, it's a government project, but it's not available to the public at this point. And it's really right now what their big push is about water, converting unclean water to purified water, because they know this is going to ultimately be a big issue in the future. And that may be a lot closer than we think.
Okay. And are you talking about, what level of government are you talking about, Mark?
Federal.
Federal, okay.
Oh, yeah, federal. Yeah, I'm sorry, not state or local, but federal government, federal money. And what they do is they put it out for bid, and then they, after you put all of your ideas on paper, then you have to sell it to a committee. And if they buy into it, then they'll probably give you, $5 million to develop the product. And then they have an interest in it. Obviously, goes back to, is it a commodity? Is it essential? Who has control? But I think the government recognizes that without water, we're in deep trouble. And we are using up water at a faster rate than it can regenerate into our groundwater. So we need to come up with some solutions on using the water that is on the surface.
Absolutely.
Which is oceans and lakes and whatever.
Exactly. And you can still see my screen. I sometimes use infographics like this, and I'm always looking for graphics like this because I teach in a, I guess I forgot to introduce myself. I teach in interior design, and I deal with a lot of people who grasp their information visually. And so I look for graphics like this where it talks about how it's really a minuscule amount of the water available to us that is actually usable by us. And the book talks about how it's 0.5% of the world's water that is what we're grappling with in terms of providing access, making sure it's clean, making sure it's safe, portable, all of those things. And as Catherine was mentioning about the technology and how far it's advanced in terms of how much it can filter out, there still is so much we need to do in terms of filtering out substances in there like nitrates and so on that might have more long-term effects. Because when the book talks about diarrhea and things like that, that's, yes, that's very, very significant in some of the countries especially, but that's one side of the coin. And there are much more long-term effects that are invisible and that don't have symptoms unless they're manifested. And so that's something also to wrap our minds around in all of this.
I think that's an important point, Gary, because right now we're facing an issue where regulatory agencies, well, one, they're only supposed to put out one new regulation and get rid of two, like a 2-for-1. That doesn't make a lot of sense when you have to add to lists of contaminants because of changing realities. Water being an example. There are 90-something plus contaminants that are checked for in public water, but there are also major emerging issues on an ongoing basis that need to be dealt with. Personal care product residues are showing up in our drinking water all the time.
Yes.
Pass through from pharmaceutical drugs, drinking water all the time. None of those chemicals are really studied toxicologically. They're studied more ecotoxicologically. So how do they distribute in the environment? We don't know what kind of health effects they might be having. And then we have a whole new area of microplastics and microfibers associated with plastics and microfiber clothing when it's washed. All of this stuff is showing up in our drinking water. And the microplastics and the microfiber items are showing up on a nanoscale. So they're nanoscale substances. And there's all kinds of things we could say about the toxicology of nanoscale substances and how they end up in human cells, actually, and just sort of sticking around in human cells. That we don't really know what the long-term consequences are, which is why agencies have to have that kind of flexibility with the regulations to deal with them as they come along. So, you know, some of it is to protect everybody and to prevent, you know, long-term disease problems from being very, very expensive when the whole issue could be shifted up front. And yes, that would have some cost. But if you look at the full cost benefit, it saves a lot of money. So there's kinds of things that are kind of happening that we need to be really, you know, understand them deeply and think about what's going on. So.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that perspective, because I think it's so systemic and any kind of system is very complex. But I think to grapple with a complex system, we cannot do it without the big picture and the long-term picture. And that's one of the things, even as we are grappling with issues like access for the world's population, it is safe access, but with a long-term view. And it's very important that all of those different disciplines that you were mentioning, Catherine, need to be at the table for a discussion like that. You know, it's not just the smart grid or the providing the water to where it needs to be, but what's in it, what's maybe getting into it, and things like that, that really needs to be addressed.
I think cost is a big factor in all this. I think the movement lately has been in desalination. If I'm not mistaken, I think California is some cities there. If I'm not mistaken, San Diego is already desalinating them, having a desalination plant. They can get the seawater and convert them into fresh water, but it's a very expensive thing. So I don't know how it would affect us since we are inland, but all the coastal areas, I mean, that's something we could think about. But it's expensive, so who's going to foot the bill? That's obviously something that we can...
It's a consideration.
Something that affects Iowans greatly, and then everybody downstream, down to the Mississippi and the Gulf of Mexico, is our agriculture. And it's a terrible thing. You're not allowed to talk about it really. But CAFOs, the factory farmed pig raising places, I mean, those are enormous pollutants. And they're not supposed to have spills, but they have spills continuously. And they run into little streams, and the little stream runs further, and off it goes into all of our waters.
Yes, Renata, that's an important consideration, and that's why I was looking at the news from yesterday about how maybe some of those things that could be regulated might not be regulated.
No.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about this? If not, I will move on to the next main idea that I had listed for today. And that is a connected world. And there are so many ideas sitting within this, obviously. There is access to the internet. There's also what content is being accessed. And there's also issues about who is creating that content, who is accessing that content, who is consuming the content, if you will, and lots of ideas therein. So this is one of the graphics that Peter Diamandis, who's one of the authors, he still continues to add to his website. And it shows how many mobile connections we have compared to the population in each of those places. And you'll see, different numbers. The global average is 96%, etc. We are a very connected world, and yet there are many pockets that are not connected. So it made me look into, and again, the book has some thoughts about this, about how the internet is being delivered, if you will, by drones, satellites, balloons, and there's so much innovation therein that I just wanted to share a couple of those examples that we could all look at. And maybe you know this already, but it would be good to watch this together. Google came up with a relatively simple idea, but that took them years to develop, so that they could come up with a mobile device that could provide internet to areas that otherwise would have no access. And so what they came up with are balloons that are sent 12 miles up into the stratosphere, and then they can be fine-tuned to catch the right winds so that they could be positioned, so that they create a chain of a connected chain that could beam the internet down to antennas down on the ground. So I'm going to again stop the show here, because I'm going to go back to where I've downloaded some of these. First, I'll show you one that talks about what Project Loon is.
Sometimes everyone isn't really everyone. Like when people say, everyone's on the internet, because the truth is, for each person that can get online, there are two that can't. And when we look closer, not everyone looks even less like everyone. In some places, it's more like 1 in 1,000. In others, it's 1 in 10,000. And in some places, no one's online at all. But what if there was a way to light up the entire globe and finally make all the world's information accessible to all of the world's people? Well, even though today 1 in 3 kids can't get to a real secondary school, everyone can have secondary school come to them. In places where there aren't enough doctors, everyone could be held by doctors in other places. Farmers everywhere could start using better weather data, so everyone could enjoy a bigger harvest. And because small businesses that are on the internet grow twice as fast, everyone could create new opportunities for everyone. But how do we bring the internet to everyone? Maybe finding an answer starts with looking somewhere new. Like up, and trying something different, like balloons. Yeah, that's right, balloons. Because it turns out that if you use balloons, it's faster and easier and cheaper to give everyone the internet than it is to give some people the internet. That's why we're giving it a try, and why there's hope that someday soon, everyone really will mean everyone.
Okay, so that was about Project Loon, and I wanted to show you an example. Let's hope I've saved it here. Sorry for, yes, okay. When I'm sharing my screen, it does not show me everything, so I'm just, okay, let's watch this one. Where it's being tested. And this was a few years ago when it was being tested.
Run a small farm. When I'm using the internet, first thing I'll check is the weather, see if my sheep are going to dry out. At the moment, the wool's not dry. So I'm just looking for a window so I can plan my week. We've gone through a number of different internet providers to try and get reliable internet. It was so slow that we had to click on a page and go and find something to do for 10 minutes.
So can you give us a quick update on the launch?
Having a team from Google on our farm to try all this for the first time has been really exciting.
All right, coming out, 3, 2, 1. Straight up, straight up, straight up, straight up. Starting today, we're launching a few dozen balloons so that 50 testers right here in the Christchurch area can get online through this experimental balloon network.
We can go.
Yay!
That was fast, too. To be the first person to do that is a little bit cool as well.
Having access to the internet can change lives, and there are 5 billion people on the earth that aren't reached. Balloon-powered internet sounds positively mad, and in a way it is, but it's mad in a very practical way that could just work.
Okay, so that was just an example of, I'm going to cancel when it starts running again. That was just an example of how it was implemented or tested. But it was really interesting to me that there are, okay, Google is a company that was testing this, but then Facebook's creator also, and you might have heard about this, the Aquila drone. Facebook came up with the Aquila drone that is solar powered, and this is this really ambitious, huge drone. It's almost the same wingspan as a Boeing 737 that could then beam internet down to areas that don't have it. I found that fascinating. I'm not going to show you that video because it's repetitive in a way. It's different, but it's the same idea about how to use something different to get internet access. And then when I looked and dug in further, there were many examples of how the balloon-powered internet really brought internet access to remote areas where teachers could fold that into their lesson plans. And even though it was just for maybe 40 minutes that internet was available during that connection, there was I think I might have downloaded that quote somewhere, but I can send it to you all later, where a teacher expresses how wonderful the class discussion was because of those few moments that the internet was accessed. That made me think about when the internet is referred to in this book, The Technological Revolution and the Internet is a tool for connectivity and cooperation. It made me think about who are the content creators and who are the content consumers and what is the role of media in all of this. And the slide that you see here in front of you is contrasting two film industries. One is obviously Hollywood, and it's referenced on one of the pages here where the authors talk about content creation and the immediacy of access to the content that's created. And they compare YouTube versus Hollywood in terms of what content is created and how it's disseminated and things like that. And I wondered about that, and I was thinking, well, is YouTube the best comparison for Hollywood, or should it be something like Netflix, you know, or something that's so pervasive and a lot of people know? I think everyone here knows about Netflix, right? The content, the website where you can watch movies and shows and things like that at your fingertips, if you will. So that made me think about Hollywood, which creates maybe 500 films a year. I just wanted to contrast that with something closer to my home called Bollywood. If people have not heard about it yet, it's the Hollywood of Mumbai and India. And they pride themselves on creating 1,600 films a year. And that was an interesting contrast for me because I was thinking about, and this little graphic in the middle that you can't really tell was an infographic again, that if you dig down deeper, it tells you how many millions are made and how many films are made in each and who is accessing them and things like that. But I put that more to get our thought process going, right? It made me think about, where do we get our information? How do we access our information? Could we really achieve abundance and that synergy and so on and so forth? In order to achieve that sort of synergy, are there certain avenues or pathways to creating content and consuming or accessing content that are more conducive to those synergies? I wondered, because I did ask once in my class, because I wanted my class to read newspapers and, you know, some of the periodicals that we were subscribing to. So I was just trying to gauge in my class, where do you get your news? And one of the things that was brought up was Facebook. And so that made me think, that made me ponder, how do we access our information? Where do we access our information? If information is central or important in creating the synergy or you know, catalyzing some of the things that the book is talking about. So I wonder, what are your thoughts?
Well, this is Cindy. I would just add another question. Not only where do we get our information, but how do we evaluate the information that we get? How do we learn to evaluate the information we get?
Mm-hmm.
I find YouTube really entertaining, but I mean, you can find good information there, but usually it's just kind of not that informational, and because I'm not looking for it there. So I could say, well, I don't get any information from YouTube, but it's just because I'm not looking.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, you know, on Facebook, I'm looking for information, but I'm only getting, you know, maybe one part of the story. So we really have to learn how to evaluate the information that we have access to.
Mm-hmm. Yes, those are good points.
I have a couple of comments. So I've been to Haiti, and the group I was working with there, they have a university and they have a brand new computer lab and access to the internet. And as we were going there, we were teaching them how to help them grow food better. I went with Buckeye Community College, and they were like, oh my gosh, where are you finding all this information? And a lot of it was like, Google, you know, you Google the information. But so then we tell them that, but then we don't tell them, you know, here at UNI, I really appreciate, I think every class I've been in, every professor has talked about how do you find credible sources.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not, you know, these people that are just getting the internet, they're probably not getting that, you know, how to find those credible sources.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like that's something I guess I want to go back and do is teach them a class on that.
Mm-hmm.
How to find those credible sources. And then another, and I just think that's awesome that they can be connected to all this information now. And, and my second point is when I went to the World Food Prize this fall, the Borlaug Dialogue, one of the awards that was given to a young entrepreneur was a man from Kenya. And he developed a software program that the farmers could use for risk management. So that they would buy this insurance for the ranchers. And if the weather was going to do something, you know, if it predicted it to be dry, or if it didn't rain for so many days, these farmers then would have connections with the insurance company or the government, I can't remember which one it was, but would send them a check. And it was all done through the internet. And they could tell where to graze their cattle and where, you know, to stay away from, or tell them to keep them at home, and all based on the weather. And so it's just this whole connectivity is really helping people all over the world.
Absolutely.
There's an interesting blogger named Anil Dash, D-A-S-H, who is an entrepreneur and a technology guy who's really focusing now on making sure that we focus on the equitability in technology and making sure it's accessible to everyone. So I think that's an interesting aspect. There are many things we can do, but are they accessible to everyone? So I think that's really important that we're, you know, this idea that you can float a balloon up and somebody can have access to the internet is just amazing.
Absolutely. Good points being raised. I wanted to add one thing to what you're all saying. Access to internet is important. Yes, we're seeing that it can be important. It can be used in very beneficial ways, etc. One of the other things about connectivity, though, is it's not just my relationship with the internet and how much I can access from it. If we are truly to use it as a tool for cooperation, how can we create the types of communities, and this is sort of getting at what Cindy you raised very early on, how can we generate, or how can we facilitate the creation of communities that could take us beyond the status quo? And the reason I bring that up, I'll give you a little bit of background. I attended a couple of years ago a summit of the National Breast Cancer Council. And in there, some of the discussions revolved around, you might do research in your domain, and that's a silo of some kind, and there's someone else doing research in their domain. But in order for us to really address, and the summit was about a cure for breast cancer, in order to address a cure, you really need overlaps between those domains. You need to bring diverse people to the table.
Right.
So if we have internet access, and we're talking about everyone has access to the internet, which is great, it's a fantastic goal. It begins to generate all kinds of ideas. How can we cross, how can we get this overlap going? How can we generate the kinds of, whether it's orchestrated discussions or whether it's by chance discussions. And I feel like there might be potential for that in terms of the communities that can be created, or through internet access, etc. But I wonder what your thoughts are about that, because it does deal with content, access to content that everyone can look at and interpret in their own ways from their domains, and that strengthens ideas and that strengthens approaches.
I think this is Eric. I think first of all, it has got to be something that interests every parties in the discussion. So if you're talking about transnational, then it has got to be a topic that interests everyone, that concerns the welfare and maybe an ongoing problem that is faced by those other parties in the table. So I guess that's the first thing that will be most important. And second thing, if there's a solution which is feasible, whether economically or is it just all the talk but no feasible solution that could come out of it, then that might just reduce the interest, I guess. But if it is something that somebody else, anybody could work on, then I guess it will be something that people would be more interested or tempted to follow up on.
I think there's another component to this too, and that is even if you're thinking about, you mentioned the issue with cancer and various other chronic diseases, complex etiologies and things like that. In the area of biochemistry and biophysics, there are so many protein pathways, cell surface proteins that are identified, and they have to be teased out. And there's just so much information coming around about that all the time that I think to some extent it's going to take, better computing, faster computers. But there's a lot of discoveries that are being made that are making that possible. So supercomputing and artificial intelligence algorithms will bring some of those things together. If you can get the supercomputers and the artificial intelligence algorithms in place, it will begin, creating, you can string together multiple studies that could illustrate possible potential pathways that then could be tested. And that is going to further advance our knowledge and understanding, as it'll lead to new experiments and new insights. And we're not quite there yet with that. So there is some hardware and software. When I say algorithms, like software that could run that hardware. There's some boundaries to that yet, but they're quickly falling, I think.
That's good. And I think what you were referring to is also what the authors have in their pyramid. As part of the pyramid, they have AI, they have robotics, they have some of the supercomputing things going on. Yes, absolutely right. In addition to that, I think there are cultural barriers that I'm hoping, subcultural and cultural barriers that might be erased if people could see the potential of these new technologies and the fact that, okay, now I can share data and actually get that interpreted. It's kind of like that mining example in the book. Is it McEwen or someone who hosted the mining data and made it available to everyone? I think it was gold. He was mining for gold. But it's kind of like that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's really good advances that could merge with erasing the cultural barriers.
So Christine here talking. A lot of it is our public policy and systems change because university labs, everybody's trying for tenure and everybody's trying to publish, and so they are reluctant to share their data. And so it's how things are funded, the way we've set up our system of funding that is really squashing and putting a kibosh on the sharing of data, the sharing of ideas, the collaboration. So that's why it's very much a political issue too. It's very much a we can't cure cancer without changing some public policy and some systems change.
So in a way, we go right back to where we started, where we acknowledged how this is, whenever you deal with a complex system, there are multiple parts, and the movement in one part impacts the other. And it's impossible to talk about those parts without discussing the influences. And yes, there are political influences. Yes, there are cultural influences. And there are other microsystemic influences. And I think the book tries to address different parts of it. But I feel like the book is only half the story, or, 1/3 the story, if you will, getting us on that path, which is why I was checking his website to see what else is being posted on there. Let's see what else is going on over there. That also brings us to, I don't have a slide for that, but it also brings us to the techno-philanthropists and what they're doing with the power of their money, directing their interests to social causes and issues that they feel are impacting, in my view, this is my interpretation, that is impacting the rising billion in a way. And because I try to keep up with what Facebook is doing and so on, I don't know if you are aware or have come across Mark Zuckerberg and his wife recently came up with what they call a biohub. Has anyone heard about that?
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Chan Zuckerberg Biohub, and it tries to bring together scientists and engineers and all these different people together to address diseases and address some of these things that we've been, the future. But again, Zuckerberg would be in the category in this book of a techno-philanthropist.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just show you what let me just share the screen just so that you can see what I'm seeing. And Juno, please let me know when it's time to wrap up, because I could be so engrossed in this that I lose track of the time, but so this is the Chan Zuckerberg Biohub. For those who may not be familiar, Zuckerberg is the person who created Facebook, and his wife is she's a doctor, and here they've come up with their vision for this biohub, where they envision solving the world's, let me see if I can move this out, biggest problems together. But they were all part of the, I forget what it's called, but it was Bill Gates and what's the name of the richest man?
Buffett.
Yes. They had come up with was it a pledge that they had others sign on to, where they, some of these technical success stories could pledge half of their money or a significant amount of their money.
For philanthropy.
Yes, for philanthropy.
Out of their billions away.
Yes.
To do good stuff.
Exactly. And so this is a part of that initiative, the Chan Zuckerberg initiative. So I see things like that. And I wonder whether it's they're doing their little part in trying to break down some of those barriers, Christine, that you were mentioning, that people operate in these very strict, regulated, politically manipulated silos. So that was interesting to me. I also follow the advances that Elon Musk is trying to come up with, and it's fascinating. But one thing strikes me in there is the capacity to fail and pull yourself up and keep trying. The Aquila drone that I showed you a picture of that crashed in November, the video that I have embedded in the PowerPoint is of the successful launch in July, but then they tried it again in November and it crashed. And so the idea is, in our pathway to abundance, there are going to be multiple failures in terms of innovations and innovators, and and the resilience that's needed there is another thing.
But then there are pockets, or institutions or individuals like Google and Zuckerberg who are completely committed to moving forward. And if you read, for example, or learn about Google's teaching the computer how to learn, and the computer learns by itself, by doing. To me, it's absolutely mind-boggling that this can happen, and that it does happen, and that it has these fantastic end results. And that's how they developed translation by computer, First they gave it 3 words, and then they had 6 words, and then 20 words. And then they could make sentences. Not they, but the computer.
Yes, yes.
It's just mind-boggling that this is all possible. And those people exist who want to keep that going and keep on going and keep on going.
Exactly.
That's abundance.
Yes, and so that spirit of how do we keep on going was
because they're passionate. They're totally passionate.
Exactly.
If you're passionate about one thing, you keep on going.
Right, and that, you're absolutely right, Renata, and that was brought home to me in a way because over the weekend I saw the movie Hidden Figures. Has anyone seen it? Yeah. And in there you see the human capacity, and then you see the introduction of the first computer. But then here's these wonderful human beings labeled computers initially. Right. And then last night I saw Nova on PBS, where they talked about the making of a ship, like this Dreamliner ship, and all the work that goes into it. And that made me think about, many decades ago, that's how people from India would have traveled to the United States, and then after that they had the making of a plane, and it made me think about, we are building on those lessons and those successes now, and we're looking towards the future, because alongside all that information now I see SpaceX is going to test another 4 missions to launch people into space. And so we're continuously evolving our technologies and where we can take them. It's fascinating to me that it takes technologies, but it also takes so much human initiative and human capacity.
Brain too. Exactly. If it wouldn't be for Katherine Johnson, John Glenn would be dead.
I just have 2 more things to mention.
Sure.
Building on that is, you talked about risk and taking risk. We live in a society where we're too afraid to take a risk because we're afraid of failure and we're afraid of what everybody else is going to do. But these big companies, these Googles, these Facebooks, they're not afraid to let their employee take a risk.
That's right.
They know they're going to fail, but you know what? They support them in their failures.
Yeah.
Because they know they will build on them. And so when you're safe, when you feel safe in launching something new, knowing that you're not going to be, ostracized or whatever, you're more apt to explore and be able to do those kinds of things. And so that's one point. And then another point I want to say is, we're talking about what everybody else is doing.
Yes.
I always like to think, what can I do?
Yes.
And what we are doing right now with this Zoom meeting, not just meeting for the book club and talking about it. Look at all the different disciplines that are here. But now we're using technology to do this. And, you know, and getting back to Cindy's point of, you know, how can we do this? Zoom meetings to collaborate on research from all over the globe. An overarching theme and do it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So
Was someone else in the audience going to say something?
No.
Okay, to me, this kind of comes all the way back around to what Cindy had to say when we first started out, which is look at everything that's going on around us right now. Yeah, we can have things like this and we can encourage each other and we can further elaborate on these technologies and ideas and things like that. But I think, you know, and for me, I'm going to try and challenge myself when I hear more often about, oh, your legislators are going to be at the AEA. I'm going to try to force myself to
This
go
Saturday morning
and
from
ask them
10 to
about this.
12.
I'm going to go up to the microphone and I'm going to say things like, do you know about these technologies? Tell me what you're doing about them. And if they can't answer that for me, I hope it makes them a little uncomfortable because I don't think just less is going to get me anywhere because I think they're going to be like, yeah, I'm busy or I'm tired, you know. But if I say, what are you doing about this? And then they can't tell me, then maybe it'll motivate them to learn about it and be more inclined to take action on the issues. That's what I'm thinking.
Absolutely. So raising awareness through.
Okay. This, Christine, and this is my area of some experience, let's put it that way. The best way to approach a legislator is to educate them and then give them something they can do. Because they don't understand how to solve all the problems. And so you need to, ahead of time, do your homework and say, you know, give them, say you can co-sponsor or you can vote yes on this particular piece of legislation because that piece of legislation will solve your problem. But asking them to solve the problem doesn't move things forward as easily. So always give them, you know, educate them and then give them something very specific that they can do.
But what if the technology, what if these issues are so cutting edge that there's really nothing, I mean, to some of this, I would be hard pressed to say this is a policy you could vote on. And I'm not sure that some of them know about these connections. So
yeah.
And I don't know, I don't always get the feeling, I don't know. I don't always get the feeling that they want to hear me talk to them about it, you know?
This is Renata speaking. Our legislators, our local Cedar Valley legislators, and a little bit beyond, they're very, very, very willing to listen to anything you tell them. And you can send them fantastic links and write-ups and articles, and they truly will read them. And they are happy about being able to learn about subjects they are not really involved in every day. About subjects we want them to sit in judgment of. And so our legislators, I have to really stand up for them. I think they're wonderful in their capacity and their willingness to listen and to learn and to do something about it.
Okay, Renata, I'm going to take your word for it. And tomorrow I'm going to send them information about abundance. And I'm going to say that, Renata, can I do that? Renata told me that you should listen. No, that's a good idea.
No, you shouldn't say should. You said you would listen to it.
Yes.
You would listen to it.
Yeah. Okay.
W instead of SH.
Great discussion going on, but I just want to remind you there's less than 1 minute left. So you want to concluding remarks from Dr. Petra.
Okay, well, I think this is just the beginning. I feel like there are so many issues that we talked about and we could continue. Pat, were you going to say something? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, my cup is half full and I'm always very, very happy to see all of the wonderful things that are happening in the future. And so, and I would say sharing with legislatures the good things that are happening will give them stories to tell about. And I think sharing good stories with legislatures is a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for this session and for allowing me to share some of these thoughts. And I really learned from all of you as well. So thank you, Juno, for inviting me. And
thank you very much, Dr. Bertrabet.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Betty.
Thank you all.
Thank you all
Thank
for attending
you.
this book club meeting.
thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
I know.
Yeah.